Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Tales from the L&D Bookshelf. Today, I'm thrilled to be sitting down with Tim Slade, who's going to explore lessons from his book, The eLearning Designer's Handbook. From project to kickoff to final deliverable, Tim in this book shares how to manage the full design process, navigate stakeholder relationships, and bring engaging, purposeful digital learning to life. Whether you're new to instructional design or mentoring others in the field, the book is a huge resource full of tips, lessons, and insights that you can use right away. And I'm thrilled to have him here on today's podcast. Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, David. I appreciate it.
I appreciate everything that you do for the field and taking some time to chat with us here.
Thank you.
So I've known you for a number of years now.
Mm.
Probably better not to put a timestamp on that. We'll age ourselves. But for anyone who might be watching the podcast who's not familiar with work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe the story behind what brought the book to life?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, good. Yeah, I've worked in the industry, 17, 18 years now. I fell into it by accident. That's kind of the opening of my book, actually. I used to catch shoplifters for a living, and somebody was like, hey, you're really good at doing that. You should be teaching others. And I got promoted into a training coordinator role, creating training content for how to catch shoplifters. And I was doing instructional design and e-learning development, and I didn't know what any of that stuff was. And I always like telling that story because I think, from the very first time I ever went to a conference and as I advanced into my career, that was the one thing that I think most people don't realize is that we're just like this weird collection of misfits in this industry who are good at something and then fell into this for the most part. I mean, that's changing. But, when I got into this industry, nobody was intentionally an instructional designer. And I climbed the ladder and I worked in every corner of this industry. And my book, The eLearning Designer's Handbook, it came along back in 2016, 2017, I was leading a team of instructional designers at a tech company. And I spent the first 9 months on that team helping establish what our process looked like, not just from an instructional design standpoint, but e-learning development, because that was primarily what my team did. And the people who were on my team, none of them were instructional designers or e-learning developers either. And so I was teaching them really everything that I had learned up until that point and my process for it. And at the end of that 9 months, I was like, oh, I think I have a book now. I have all this content that I've created for them. And so that's kind of where the book came from. Was I wanted to provide a really practical, process-driven guide for all the stuff that I wish, I had known when I was first getting started in the industry. So yeah.
I started accidentally myself in this field, but I started as a banker who was good at being banking, and they actually show other people. Shoplifting is a much more provocative area to get
Yeah,
started.
it's a lot of fun.
It's a better story.
I miss catching shoplifters. I still have an eye for it. I can still see them when I'm in the store. Yeah. And creating training for it was a lot of fun too.
Well, so let's jump into some of the principles of the book. Let's talk about
Yeah.
e-learning design for a minute. You said you wrote the book. I think somewhere I read that you said you wrote the book that you wish you had when you got started. What's missing from the resources that were out there when you started?
Gosh, well, when I first fell into the industry, I mean, there was like the Articulate community. There wasn't a lot of other online communities. I think, we had Twitter, and LinkedIn, kind of people were on LinkedIn, but then anything else out there from a literature standpoint, it was a college textbook or something where it would be like a really boring book with pigeons on the front of it for some reason. You know what I mean? And that's a real example because when I wrote the book, I actually went on Amazon and I searched instructional design to go, what do people put on the covers of these books? And there was one book that was an instructional design book that had gray skies and it was an ugly beach with birds walking on it. I'm like, that makes no sense. So yeah, I mean, back then there was a lot of theory and big ideas, which is important, but there wasn't practical information. What do you put in a storyboard, or
Right.
how do you do a kickoff meeting with stakeholders and subject matter experts? And what's the difference between a stakeholder and subject matter experts? So it was, my initiation into this industry was all very process driven. Initially, later, theory became more important as I understood the practice of what we do. At the end of the day, I needed to be able to get my work done. And so understanding how do I manage a project and how do I do a storyboard and what does a review cycle look like? those were the meat and potatoes of actually doing the work that was really important that there wasn't information out there on. And so that's kind of the initial vision of the book.
So the work that you've done over the years has been supporting this community, filling in that gap.
Mm.
And one of the things I find interesting is, even the language that we're using here, the title of your book, e-learning designers. If I
Mhm.
put those two words together, it kind of has a certain meaning. But if I looked at what that
Mm.
looks like in practice, it's a much broader thing than what the words might imply. And you've supported people at all ends of the spectrum. So I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious, what do you find in your work that some of the misunderstandings that people have around what e-learning design actually is?
That's a good question. Well, it's funny. I mean, when I first started in this industry, almost all of my work was e-learning design and development. There were some peripheral things I would work on. And, being ignorant to understanding the full scope of our industry, I really thought at the time like instructional design is this other separate thing. I'm an
Right.
e-learning designer, they're an instructional designer. And so for me, I mean, and that's obviously evolved over the years. I'm one of those people that I think titles are absolutely meaningless in our industry,
Mhm.
whether you call yourself an e-learning designer or a developer or an instructional designer or learning architect or learning experience designer. Like at the end of the day, it's not about the modality of what we do. It's what we're trying to achieve through that. So yeah, I don't remember what your question was now.
Just some of the misconceptions that people might have around what e-learning
Oh,
designers actually do.
yeah, okay. Well, I think the misconception that a lot of that people think e-learning designers do is that like we're just creating pretty slides all day, I suppose,
Hmm.
or we're using tools that are just PowerPoint-esque. When in reality, like the thing that's really unique and special about e-learning development and design is that unlike other forms of training that we might create, e-learning, it combines like so many different practices and capabilities and skill sets and pieces of multimedia in order to create the thing that you're creating. Like it's not just uh, you know, it incorporates user interface design and multimedia design and
Hmm.
animation design and interaction design and sometimes video and all it like it's a combination of a lot of different skill sets that makes it uniquely more complex than other types of training we might develop. And I think people underestimate that on the outset of it.
And one of the things that I have noticed in my career, and I've never been as deep in the e-learning design as you are, but I've been peripherally around it in strategy and things of that sort. And one of the things that I've noticed, and one of the reasons I like your book, is because it doesn't. A lot of people come to me, and when I hear them talk about e-learning design, what I'm hearing myself be asked is, how do I produce content with this tool? They're
Mm,
describing it as e-learning design, but what they're really saying is, how do I create content with this particular tool that I've been assigned?
yes, yes, yes,
And
yes.
and in practice, that's what e-learning design for a lot of people is defined as. And one of the reasons that I like your book is that it's not going into here, how do I use this tool? It's talking about how to design a good e-learning course. And it's one of the reasons I recommend it to people. One of the things I like about the book is that you break it down. You break down what the
Mhm,
process is. And you've got the four steps that are there: plan, design, develop, and
mhm.
launch. And in again, I look at the language that we use sometimes. It's straightforward of what that would be, but I think that in practice we skip a lot of those steps and maybe we just hit one of them or combine them. Can you
Mhm.
give us a little bit of a high level of what each of those things are and why they're important?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing I want to say too, real quickly, going back to the misconceptions, you sparked a thing in my mind that I didn't think about in the moment is that when I talk about e-learning too, I think the misconception that I want to bust is that when I'm talking about e-learning, I'm not talking about something you just build in Storyline
Hmm.
or another authoring tool. It might be a video that you create. It might be an interactive e-learning course in Storyline or another tool, or it might be like it'd be a whole plethora of things that's beyond just slides and a next button. So I think that's an important distinction to make too. Yeah, I mean, when I think about I think if you've never designed and developed an e-learning course before, it's easy to get really overwhelmed with like I have all of this raw content and I need to create an interactive, visually engaging, instructionally sound, functional thing. How do you make that leap to that? And, I think that the people who are really talented in our industry who do that, I'm thinking like the Kevin Thorns of the world, Tom Coleman's, all of us who have done this for years and years and years, like it's easy for us to like really oversimplify that. You're like, oh, just rapid prototype some slides and create some
Yeah.
graphics and da 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 da. But if you've never done that before, this intersection between the content and how you're going to present it. Is there going to be audio narration, and what are they going to see on the screen that accompanies that? And then what happens when they click a button and why are they clicking on it? Making that leap for the first time can be incredibly overwhelming. And on top of it, if you don't know how to use the authoring tool or you're not a master at it, then that gets thrown into the mix as well. And so part of my vision behind those steps is, so if we need to create this complete thing, like let's separate out the components. Like the visuals are one thing, the content's another thing, and how we go about creating that in steps allows us to get to that end, and that in uh, not maybe not more efficient way, but like a less overwhelming way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's dig into that a little deeper and get a little practical. So we're starting with the planning phase. What does a really good kickoff look like for you?
Yeah. Well, I have the opinion that what you do during a kickoff meeting depends on where you're at in the process.
Hmm.
So, and what I mean by that is, are you having a kickoff meeting with some stakeholders and subject matter experts for the first time where they're requesting training of you? Or are you having a kickoff meeting where you've already validated that there's a learning need and a training need, and what happens there? If it's the first option, they're just, hey, we're requesting training, then and that kickoff meeting should be focused on like, well, what's the change we're seeking? What's the behavior issue that we're running into? How do we know that that's an issue? And that results in a needs analysis, like before we commit to e-learning or any sort of training intervention. Whereas on the other hand, let's assume that that's all been validated. Then the other type of kickoff meeting that I think is most effective is like, well, let's talk about the logistics of this project we're going to work on together. Like, what's your role? What's my role? What do I need from you as a subject matter expert? What does our design and development process look like? And what are you going to expect from me every step of the way? I think the big mistake that a lot of people make with any kickoff meeting, any learning professional makes with a kickoff meeting, is they take a passive role and they think, well, they're the important director, VP. They're going to lead this initiative. When in reality, like it's our job. We're the ones doing the majority of the work, and we have to bring them along in the process. So we have to lead that meeting.
I love the addition of context in that. So much of the work that I think goes on in e-learning design literally and metaphorically follows a template that we just apply
Hmm.
in all circumstances, and you're bringing in the unique context of it. So that's one
Yeah.
of the things I've always appreciated about the work that you
Yeah.
do.
Thank you.
So one of the things that's in the book is you talk about writing a learning plan as compared to like a traditional script or storyboard. And again, I focus on like the differences in language. So what's the difference there and why does it matter?
Mm. Well, I mean, I'm a big proponent of doing storyboards and prototypes, but usually what I like to start out with is some sort of project plan, design document,
Hmm.
and then some sort of content outline. So I view, whether we call it a learning plan or a design document or a project plan, different teams call them different things. I think that's super important in terms of having you know, CYA, some source of truth to fall back on because, as I'm sure you've experienced and others
Hmm.
have experienced, you can meet with stakeholders, subject matter experts, come to all sorts of agreements, and then 3 weeks later, they, for whatever reason, believe that you're doing something very differently, or they'll move the goalpost. And so, having some sort of plan on the at the beginning, kind of like an internal contract between those who you're working with, and a source of truth to go, hey, well, this is actually what we agreed to, and it's not that we can't change it, but like this is the scope of the work from when we last spoke before we get into actually designing it.
Yeah. Good. Well, going a little bit further, when we moving from there to the design phase, one of the things I find people struggle with is this balance between making it, for lack of a better term, making it pretty, that visual
Hmm.
appeal versus the instructional soundness of it and the instructional
Yeah.
clarity. How do you balance that in your work?
Well, whenever I love asking people like what makes good e-learning, and you'll get some combination of people saying, "Oh, well, the content's relevant," or "It's intuitive to use," or "It's engaging," and they'll make these kind of vague statements.
Yeah.
Um, I When I define, like when I look at an e-learning course, let's say an interactive e-learning experience, the way I define its quality or the way I evaluate its quality is four things. Obviously, is it instructionally sound? Is it intuitive to use? And is it accessible? Is it visually pleasing? And then I love asking people like, well, what order would you put those things in? And people always put instructional design first, and then usually like user interface design, and the visual design last. And I'm of the opinion I like to flip it. I like to put instructional design last, not because it's least important, but because e-learning is a digital interactive piece of multimedia. Those other things, the visual design, the user interface design, those things have the ability to either elevate the instructional design or detract from it. So if it's not visually pleasing and it doesn't use good graphic design techniques, people are either going to judge it, they might check out from it. If it's not usable and accessible, then it doesn't matter how well your learning objectives are or
Right.
how based in performance the interactions are if those other things aren't there to support it. Because again, it's a piece of digital interactive multimedia. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And that your answer to that and your comments earlier about the planning phase reflects something that I also liked about the book. There's a good section in the book on tips on managing the feedback cycles that you get from your stakeholders.
Mm.
Do you have any lessons around that maybe you learned the hard way that you can share?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, I think the big lesson that I've learned and I try to help other people understand is that, those who are working with us on our projects, whether it's a stakeholder or a subject matter expert, their interaction with us on our project is not their primary job. It's
Hmm.
usually a secondary project that has been thrown on their plate, and we are extra work for them. And so, as I said earlier, like with the kickoff meeting, it is our job to bring them along in the process and make their participation as easy as possible. And so, whether that's scheduling time on their calendar and doing a live review meeting, or being really clear in the communications of saying, hey, this is what I'm sending you, and this is what I need from you, or I need you to look at this page and review this content. I mean, the big lesson there is at the end of the day, we own it and we own how easy we make it for others to participate in our project.
Yeah. One of the challenging things that can sometimes exist, I've encountered this a number of times in my own career, is when you're dealing with someone and they're explaining the need, and you're thinking like e-learning's not going to do that for you.
Mm,
Like how do you handle the conversations where someone's kind of coming maybe with the expectation of this is the course that I need you to deliver, and you're hearing the need and you're just kind of like you have to give them the news of like this isn't going to work. Like I'm not
yeah.
going to deliver this for you because it's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to say two things. I mean, I think the reverting back to like really good probing questions that we ask to understand what the issue is and leading them to understanding it, whether or not we have data to show it or whatever, asking good questions, consulting, helping them understand that there is a need, but maybe it's not the need that you think it is.
Hmm.
I think that's a careful balance that we have to make, right? Because if we just meet them with resistance, they just hear no, and then they go create it themselves,
Yeah.
rogue. On the other hand, though, I think the other thing that I always like to bring up when we talk about this, because it's not, I don't think it's often acknowledged in our industry, is that our ability as learning professionals to say no and push back oftentimes depends on who's making the ask and the
Hmm.
politics at play within the organization. When I led my team, one of the things I would always be really transparent with them about is I would say, hey, so and so, that C suite person way up the chain, they really want this course on the mid year review process. And we're all going to acknowledge this is not the right answer. And we're going to get this done as quickly and efficiently as possible. And that person will be happy so we can get back to the important work. And maybe what will have happened is we'll build some trust with that person that we might be able to leverage next time, right? Because like I think L&D people sometimes we get too dogmatic about our own crap,
Hmm.
and it's just like all or nothing. Like we're all going to be instructionally sound or we're just not going to participate at all. And I think, anyone who's actually worked in a work organization realizes it's not that simple.
I metaphorical and literal stand and clap on that one because that is something that has always been a bone of contention of mine that people judge the work of an e-learning designer in isolation
Yeah.
without the environment that it was in, the resources that were available. I mean, to your point, many times I've spoken with people who are like, I wish I had more resources. I wish I had this. I think you did good with what you had, and the person who's judging you isn't factoring in that you have a mortgage to pay this month, and you and
Yep.
you need to maintain employment and keep your stakeholders happy. And I love the analogy. It's the same one that I've often given is give that person a win, give them what they want, and it'll earn you the right to do what you feel is the right thing to do more often. Totally agree with that mentality. And I thank you so much for sharing.
Yep. Absolutely.
One of the things that I like about the book, and one of the reasons I recommend it is there's a practical aspect to it, but there's also a mindset that gets built into it. And a big part of the
Mm,
book is about having the confidence and growing into your role. You're meeting people where they are. Again, just as I was just kind of commenting, there's not a lot of judgment of people in here. It's meeting people where they are and growing into the role. What mindset shift do you feel helps people start developing that designer's mentality?
that's a good question. I've never had anyone say that about the book before. Gosh, I think when I reflect on writing the book and what I was trying to convey to people, and in you saying that, I don't know if I say this explicitly in the book because it's been a it's been a hot minute since I've cracked it open, if I'm being
Hmm.
honest, is that I think a lot of times when you fall into this industry, or you are your first time instructional designer or e-learning designer, whatever your thing is, I think a lot of times it's easy for us to assume that we are supposed to follow some predetermined process that has been created by our boss or by our teammates or whatever. And the thing that I've learned time and time and time again is, more often than not, you can safely assume nobody knows what they're doing and they're just making it up. And so you, in light of that ambiguity, you have to be the person to determine, okay, well, this is the process I'm going to follow. And this is the process I'm going to instill. And I'm going to determine how I'm going to manage and work through my projects. You can't wait around for somebody to just magically put onto your plate, like, this is how we do it. Sometimes that happens,
Yeah.
but that's the exception, not the rule. And so what I wanted to instill is there's ambiguity in our industry because there's nothing standardized about really anything that we do. So, determine how you want to do it and do it that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually, we could segue to one of the last questions I want to ask. So we started this conversation talking about the fact that we both fell into this field accidentally. A lot of people do. Most people, or at least a large percentage of the people in our field, don't come into this field through the traditional path that people thought. I'm interested in this. I went to school for this, and now I'm in this field. Most people don't take that linear path of
Sure.
tradition into this field. So what advice, and this is, we've seen a lot of this. I know you were active, it's in LinkedIn, of people who were transitioning from academia into instructional
Hmm.
design in recent
Hmm.
years. So what advice would you give someone transitioning into e-learning design from another part of L&D or from outside of, from academia? What
Yeah.
advice do you give people?
I mean, we're streaming on LinkedIn. So I'm going to say, get off LinkedIn after this call, after this,
Once this
get
is
off,
over.
once this is over, get off LinkedIn and connect with real world practitioners in your local area, however you choose to do that, because there is such a disparity between what our industry appears to be online versus like interacting with a real practitioner. And the more you go talk to different people at different companies in different types of L&D roles, you're going to discover that like there's so much variety in how our industry actually operates and what people actually do. And like I'll give two examples. If you were to go on LinkedIn right now, you would be led to believe that like AI is just taking over our industry and learning teams are just implementing AI left and right, and they're doing crazy things and adaptive learning with learning experience platforms. And if you're an instructional designer, you're going to be out of a job at the end of the year. Like, that's the noise on LinkedIn, but the reality is very different. Like, most
Mhm.
teams, they're just using like ChatGPT to rewrite emails and like write some learning objectives. You know what I mean? So go interact with real people and you'll realize that our industry is still very pragmatic and doing the same stuff we've been doing for the most part for the last decade.
You're you're touching on a lot of the stuff, that the trends that are in helping our field evolve. I'm curious. The book was written, I think, 2017, around there.
2017, yeah, the first version, and then the second edition was 2020.
So a lot has changed since 2020.
Yeah.
If you were going to update the book to another edition today, what might be different? What might you include that maybe
Ooh,
wasn't in the last
that's a
edition?
good question. Well, I'm working on that.
Good. Stay tuned. Could be a good answer.
I'm just trying to think what I feel comfortable giving. Hold on, give me a second. When I look back on the book, this is, I guess, more of a criticism to me than and if anything else, my opinions have evolved a lot further where I've been able to better explain the marriage between theory and process. So like I said, when I wrote the book, it was very process heavy, and since then, I've been trying to figure out how to marry good theory with good process. And so then, stay tuned. That's what I'll
Excellent.
say.
I
Yeah,
like that. It's good tease.
yeah.
So for the last question before we formally close the today's discussion, I always like to shift your perspective from author to reader. Are there
Okay.
things that that you're reading either recently or in the past that have been meaningful to your practice that you would recommend other people consider adding to their
Mm,
pile of books?
gosh, I'm looking at my bookshelf here. I mean, I feel like we've a lot of people have talked about it, but the let them theory is a good one, and I can think of all sorts of ways that applies to our industry by
Hmm.
letting them, whether it's stakeholders, subject matter experts. So that's the one that I'm looking at right now that I'll say let them.
Put
Yeah.
down. So, Tim, I love talking with you. I love everything that you share. Where and you're very giving to the field. So, where
Mm.
can people connect with you, learn more about the stuff that you do, and engage with you?
Yeah, well, I run a free community, the eLearning Designers Academy. We have a free community and we do all sorts of stuff there. And then we have a cohort program for new and aspiring instructional designers. And so people can find that at elearningacademy.com.
Excellent. We'll put that link in the comments as well. Well, Tim, this has been a fascinating discussion. I always enjoy talking with you, and I appreciate the way that you share with the community. Thanks so much for being our guest here on Tales from the L&D Bookshelf.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to thank you for watching and listening to our podcast here. We will see you next month with another edition. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.